I want that one, she said, jabbing her manicured finger at the glass office I'd spent 6 years earning. Her voice echoed down the hallway, loud enough that half my team looked up from their desks. I'm serious, she added with a snap of her fingers. Move out. Dad said I could choose whichever office I wanted. My jaw clenched. My fingers curled around the stack of reports I was holding, the edges cutting into my palm. This wasn't just any employee making demands. This was Melody, the CEO's 23-year-old daughter, on her first day at the company. And she was demanding my office because she liked the view. I stared at her, searching for any hint that this was some kind of joke. But her expression remained smug, expectant. She actually believed she could waltz in here and take what I'd worked years to achieve. Behind me I heard keyboards stop clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Melody crossed her arms, her designer bag dangling from her elbow. Well, are you going to move your stuff or do I need to have someone do it for you? The humiliation burned in my throat like acid. 6 years of late nights, impossible deadlines and proving myself over and over. And this was how the company treated me? I needed to think fast. I turned to my manager, Pete, who stood frozen in the doorway like a deer caught in headlights. Pete, I said, keeping my voice steady. Can we discuss this privately? He avoided eye contact like a guilty toddler caught stealing cookies. His eyes darted between Melody and me, his face flushing red. Just work it out between yourselves, he muttered before disappearing down the hall. Coward. Melody smirked at his retreat, clearly enjoying her power. See? Even your manager knows you need to move. The dozen employees within earshot pretended to be absorbed in their work, but I could feel their eyes on us. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved it wasn't happening to them. So, Melody pressed, stepping closer to my office door. Are you going to cooperate or should I call security to help you pack? My hands trembled slightly but I forced them still. I'd worked too hard to let some entitled CEO's daughter steamroll me on her first day. Melody, I said carefully, this office was assigned to me based on my seniority and performance. I don't think it's appropriate to. She cut me off with a dismissive wave. I don't care about appropriate. I care about what I want. And I want this office. My name is Olivia. I'm 34 years old and I've been a senior analyst at Beacon Transport Solutions in Milwaukee for 6 years. I earned that glass office with every overtime hour and every project nobody else wanted to touch. When the company was hemorrhaging clients 3 years ago, I was the one who restructured our entire logistics system. When our biggest account threatened to leave, I personally flew to Denver and convinced them to stay. That office wasn't just a room with a nice view of Lake Michigan. It was proof that hard work mattered. That dedication was rewarded. And now some spoiled CEO's daughter was marching in like she owned the building, demanding I hand it over because she liked the view. But she wasn't ready for what was coming. I stood there, processing everything while Melody examined her reflection in my office's glass wall. She adjusted her hair, clearly already imagining herself sitting at my desk. The lighting in here is perfect, she said, more to herself than to me. I'll need to do content shoots for my social media. This will be ideal. Content shoots. She wanted my office for Instagram photos. I felt something shift inside me. That cold, calculating calm that appears when you realize you're dealing with someone who fundamentally underestimates you. I'll need some time to consider this, I said evenly. Melody's smile faded. Consider what? There's nothing to consider. Move. She strutted around our floor like she was touring a luxury resort she'd just purchased. This desk is ugly, we'll throw it out, she announced, pointing at Marcus's workstation. Marcus had been with the company for 8 years. That plant is depressing, she said about the ficus tree Amanda had been nurturing for 3 years. EW, who still uses yellow folders? She asked, wrinkling her nose at the filing system we'd all agreed worked perfectly fine. Her voice carried across the entire open office space. And every single employee pretended to laugh at her observations, their chuckles hollow and forced. Because she was the boss's daughter. I watched from my doorway as she critiqued everything and everyone. Some of my colleagues shot me desperate looks, silently begging me to do something. But what could I do? Her father owned the company. Melody paused at the break room, poking her head inside. This coffee machine is ancient. I'll have Dad order something better. Maybe one of those fancy Italian ones. Carlos, who just poured himself a cup, nodded enthusiastically. That would be great, Melody. She beamed at him. See? Some people around here appreciate improvement. The passive-aggressive jab wasn't lost on me. I was already being painted as the difficult one, the person resistant to change. I retreated to my office, closing the door softly behind me. Just as I was processing a critical client escalation, one that could cost us hundreds of thousands if I didn't handle it correctly, she breezed into my office without knocking. But before I continue with what happened next, if you are enjoying this story, please like and share. She sat in my chair. My chair. Her designer heels landed on my desk with a thump, narrowly missing a stack of contracts I'd been reviewing. You'll be done in a quick minute, right? She said, examining her nails. I have a content shoot later and the lighting in here is so good. I was on the phone with our most demanding client, trying to smooth over a delivery issue. I pressed mute and turned to her. Melody, I'm in the middle of... She waved me off like I was a server who'd interrupted her conversation. Figure it out. I need the space. My client's voice crackled through the phone, asking if I was still there. I unmuted quickly, forcing my voice to stay professional. Yes, Mr. Patterson, I'm here. As I was saying, we can reroute through our Chicago hub to make up the time. Melody sighed dramatically and pulled out her phone, scrolling through social media while her feet remained planted on my desk. I finished the call as quickly as possible, my face burning with embarrassment and rage. When I hung up, I turned to face her directly. Melody, I said, keeping my voice calm, I need you to leave so I can finish my work. She looked up from her phone with exaggerated surprise. Oh my God, relax. You don't need to be so aggressive about it. Aggressive? I felt my pulse spike. I'd asked her politely. I'd used her name. I hadn't raised my voice even slightly. Dad warned me about you, she continued, swinging her feet off my desk but remaining in my chair. He said you were territorial about this office. Territorial? The word felt like a slap. I'm not territorial, I said, fighting to keep my voice even. I'm trying to do my job and you're sitting in my workspace uninvited. She rolled her eyes so dramatically I could practically hear them creaking. It's just an office. Why are you making such a big deal about it? Because it's mine, I wanted to scream. Because I earned it. Because you've been here for 4 hours and you think you can just take whatever you want. Instead, I said, if you need an office, I'm sure your father can arrange something appropriate for you. Her expression darkened. This is what's appropriate for me. I already told him I wanted this one. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. I'll give you until tomorrow morning to clear out. That's generous, considering I could just have maintenance move your stuff tonight. Then she walked out, leaving me trembling with suppressed fury. Not 5 minutes later, I heard her voice from down the hall, high-pitched and theatrical. Daddy. She was so mean to me. The door to the CEO's corner office slammed shut, loud enough that the whole floor turned to look. Through the glass walls, I could see Melody gesturing wildly, her hands flying through the air. Her father, Edmund Sutherland, sat behind his massive desk, nodding along to whatever story she was spinning. My stomach dropped. 10 seconds later, his voice boomed across the office. Olivia. My office. Now. But before I continue with what happened next, if you are enjoying this story, please like and share. The walk to his door felt like a death march. Every employee I passed looked away quickly, suddenly fascinated by their computer screens. I knocked once and entered. Edmund didn't look up from the document he was pretending to read. Melody stood beside his desk, her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Sir, you wanted to see me? I asked. Finally, he raised his head. His expression was cold, distant. Nothing like the approachable CEO who'd praised my work at last quarter's meeting. My daughter is trying to get settled in her new position, he said flatly. The least you can do is be welcoming. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he asked for my side of the story. It never came. Sir, I said carefully, she's asking me to give up my office. Edmund leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled under his chin. And is that really such an impossible request? I blinked. I've had that office for 3 years. It was assigned to me based on my performance and seniority in the analytics department. Consider it a leadership opportunity, he said, his tone brooking no argument. True leaders are flexible. They adapt to changing circumstances. Melody's smirk widened. But sir. Olivia, he cut me off. I'm not asking you to leave the company. I'm asking you to be reasonable. Melody is family. Surely you understand that family comes first. Family comes first. The words hung in the air between us. What about loyalty? What about the 6 years I'd given this company? What about the countless times I'd sacrificed my weekends and evenings to meet impossible deadlines? None of that mattered anymore, apparently. I expect this to be resolved by tomorrow, Edmund said, returning his attention to his papers. Melody starts her orientation next week and I want her comfortable. I walked out of that office with my legs shaking and my hands clenched into fists. The humiliation burned deeper than I'd expected. Not just because I was being forced out of my office but because my CEO, the man who'd personally thanked me for saving the Patterson account, had dismissed my concerns without a second thought. The rumors started that same afternoon. Did you hear Olivia made Melody cry? She actually yelled at her on her first day. I heard she's being really difficult about the whole thing. I caught fragments of conversations as I walked to the break room, each whisper like a small knife between my ribs. My reputation, 6 years of hard-earned respect, was unraveling because of one tantrum thrown by a spoiled CEO's daughter. I wanted to rage, to scream, to march into Edmund's office and tell him exactly what I thought of his nepotistic nightmare. But I didn't. Instead, I shut my office door, closed the blinds, and took 3 deep breaths. Then I whispered the words that had gotten me through every difficult moment in my career. Play it smart. Acting on emotion would only make things worse. Edmund clearly wasn't going to listen to reason. Melody had him wrapped around her finger. If I wanted to keep my office, if I wanted to protect myself, I needed to think strategically. I opened my laptop and started researching. Company policies, office assignments, building management protocols. There had to be something I was missing. Some angle I hadn't considered yet. I worked through lunch, ignoring the curious glances from colleagues who passed by my door. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, most people had left. But I stayed, digging through old emails and documents, looking for anything that might help. The next morning, Melody floated around the office telling everyone she was modernizing the place. She snapped selfies in my office when I stepped out for a meeting. I returned to find her posing by the window, her phone held at various angles as she searched for the perfect shot. "Oh, don't mind me," she said breezily when I appeared in the doorway. "Just getting familiar with my new space." I didn't respond. I couldn't trust what might come out of my mouth. She giggled with junior staff members, complimenting their outfits and asking about their weekends. To them, she probably seemed friendly and approachable. To me, she was a ticking time bomb. During the afternoon, I heard her talking loudly with Amanda near the copy machine. "I'm really excited about changing the culture here," Melody said, her voice carrying across the office. "I think we've gotten too stuck in our ways. Sometimes fresh perspective is exactly what a company needs." Amanda murmured something non-committal in response. Someone from accounting actually called her Mini CEO when she walked past, and she beamed at the nickname. And then, at the end of the day, I found it. A pink sticky note plastered on my office door. "Move out by Friday." 5 words. Written in loopy handwriting with a smiley face at the end. I stared at it, feeling something cold spread through my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something sharper, more focused. She'd made this personal. And now I was going to end it. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The humiliation. The whispers. The pink sticky note with its cheerful smiley face. Around midnight I gave up on sleep entirely. I made coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. But I wasn't digging for dirt on Melody. That would be petty, and more importantly, it wouldn't solve my problem. Instead, I started researching the office building itself. Beacon Transport Solutions leased several floors in the Riverside Tower, a modern building overlooking Lake Michigan. We'd moved here 4 years ago during an expansion. I pulled up the building's management website and started clicking through pages. Tenant information. Lease agreements. Office assignments. Something about the setup had been nagging at me since this whole mess started. Then I found it. A directory listing every office by code number. My office was listed as 14C. Next to it, instead of Beacon Transport Solutions like most offices, there was a different name. An LC I didn't recognize. I clicked on the listing and read the details twice, my heart starting to pound. My office wasn't owned by Beacon Transport Solutions. It was leased separately, individually, by someone else. I dug deeper, searching through my old emails from 4 years ago when we'd moved buildings. And there was. I went to the building manager's office first thing the next morning, before most employees had even arrived. His name was Theodore Brooks. He was a tall man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put people at ease. "Good morning," he said when I knocked on his open door. "How can I help you?" I stepped inside, my hands clutching a folder of documents I'd printed at home. "I have some questions about the leasing structure for Office 14C. He nodded and pulled up his computer system. "Let me take a look. 14C. Yes, that's an interesting one." "Interesting how?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He gestured for me to come around the desk so I could see the screen. "This particular office is leased individually, separate from the company's main agreement." My heart hammered in my chest. "Can you tell me who holds that lease?" Theodore adjusted his glasses and scrolled through the information. "The lease is held by an LLC called North Point Holdings." I pulled out one of my documents and showed it to him. "Is this the same North Point Holdings?" He glanced at the paper and nodded. "Yes, that's the one." "Why do you ask?" I took a deep breath. "Because North Point Holdings is my LLC. I own that office lease." Theodore's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't look entirely surprised. "Well then, that does change things, doesn't it?" 4 years ago, when Beacon Transport Solutions restructured and moved to this building, they'd offered senior staff members a unique benefit package. Instead of the company leasing all the offices directly, they gave us a substantial stipend and the option to lease our own workspace. The idea was to give senior employees more autonomy and investment in the company's success. It was also a tax strategy that benefited both the company and the employees. I'd chosen Office 14C and signed the lease through my personal LLC, which I'd set up years earlier for freelance consulting work. Then honestly, I'd forgotten all about it. The rent came out of my account automatically each month, and I just internalized it as part of my benefits package. But now, as I stood in Theodore Brooks's office, the full implications crashed over me like a wave. Melody had been demanding access to space she had absolutely zero legal right to occupy. And Edmund? He had no authority to force me out. The office was mine. Legally, completely, undeniably mine. A calm, cold satisfaction washed through my entire body. Theodore was watching me carefully, probably reading the emotions crossing my face. "I take it someone has been trying to access this office without your permission?" "You could say that," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Well," he said slowly, "as the leaseholder, you have complete control over who enters that space." I asked Theodore the question that had been forming in my mind since last night. What happens if someone tries to occupy a space they don't have rights to? He didn't hesitate. "That would be trespassing. Building security takes that very seriously." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "And if they try to force the actual leaseholder out?" Theodore's expression grew more serious. "That would be a lease violation. Depending on the severity and circumstances, it could result in security action, legal consequences, or removal from the premises." The pieces were clicking into place in my mind, forming a picture I could finally see clearly. All this time, I'd been thinking about this situation from the perspective of a company employee dealing with the boss's daughter. I'd been playing by corporate politics rules. But this wasn't a corporate politics problem anymore. This was a property rights issue. And in that arena, I held all the cards. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," I said, gathering my documents. "This has been incredibly helpful." He nodded slowly. "I'm here if you need anything else, Ms. Grant. And please call me Theodore." I left his office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in days. When I arrived at my office, my property, I found Melody already inside, measuring the space with a tape measure. She looked up when I entered. "Oh good, you're here. I need the Wi-Fi password. The connection isn't reaching properly from this corner." I set my bag down carefully. "Melody, you need to leave." "In a minute," she said dismissively, making a note on her phone. I tried again, keeping my voice level. No. Please leave my office." She looked up, annoyance flickering across her face. "God, why are you being so difficult about this? Dad already said I could have it. Your father doesn't have the authority to make that decision." Melody laughed, but it was a harsh sound. He's the CEO. He has the authority to do whatever he wants. Not with this office. She stood up, abandoning her measuring tape. Are you seriously still fighting me on this? It's just an office, Olivia. Don't be pathetic. The insult hung in the air between us. I'd spent the past few days being calm, being professional, being the bigger person. But something snapped at that word. Pathetic. Melody, I'm going to say this one more time. Leave my office. Now. She crossed her arms, stepping closer with a challenging expression. Or what? You'll tattle to HR? Newsflash. My dad owns HR too. When I didn't immediately respond, she made a show of turning back to her measuring tape. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She walked around my desk and physically bumped my chair with her knee, hard enough that the wheels jolted and I lurched forward. Oops, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Maybe you should watch where you're sitting. I felt the impact through my entire body. That wasn't an accident. That was deliberate. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Don't touch me again, I said quietly. Melody's eyes widened slightly, not with fear but with excitement. Like she'd finally gotten the reaction she wanted. Or what? She said, her voice rising. You get aggressive? Try to hurt me? Everyone already thinks you're unstable. Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and pressed a button. Yes, this is Melody Sutherland, she said into the phone, her voice suddenly shaky and frightened. A complete 180 from 2 seconds ago. I need security in Office 14C immediately. I'm being threatened. My stomach dropped. He was setting me up. 2 minutes later, 2 security guards arrived. I recognized them both, Marcus and Deshawn. They'd been working this building for years. Melody pointed at me dramatically. She won't vacate my new office. My father already approved the transfer, but she's refusing to leave and acting threatening toward me. The guards glanced at me apologetically. Marcus had helped me when I'd locked my keys in my car last winter. Deshawn always held the elevator for people. They knew me. They knew I wasn't threatening anyone. But they also knew who Melody's father was. Ma'am, Marcus said carefully, is there a way we can resolve this situation peacefully? I took a breath, thinking fast. Then an idea formed. Gentlemen, I said calmly, could you do me one favor before making any decisions? They both nodded. Can you ask the building manager to join us? I said. I believe Theodore Brooks can clarify the situation. Melody frowned. What? Why would we need? It'll just take a moment, Marcus interrupted, already reaching for his radio. Mr. Brooks, could you come to Office 14C? We have a situation that needs clarification. Theodore's voice crackled back. On my way. The 3 minutes it took for him to arrive felt like an eternity. Melody kept glancing at her phone, probably considering whether to call her father. I stood by my desk, arms crossed, breathing steadily. When Theodore arrived, he took in the scene with one sweeping glance. Melody standing near the door, me by my desk, 2 security guards looking uncomfortable in the middle. What seems to be the problem? He asked. Melody immediately jumped in. This woman is refusing to leave my new office. My father already gave me permission to. Theodore held up one hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Miss Sutherland, he said politely but firmly, I need to inform you that this office is not company property. Melody blinked. What are you talking about? Of course it is. No, Theodore said, pulling out his tablet and showing her the screen. This office is independently leased by Ms. Grant through her private LLC. Your company has no authority over this space. The color drained from Melody's face. That's impossible. I assure you it's not, Theodore continued. You have no legal right to this office. Any attempt to force Ms. Grant out would constitute a lease violation. Melody's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The office door burst open and Edmund Sutherland rushed in, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Melody called me saying security was harassing her. Theodore turned to face him calmly. Mr. Sutherland, I was just explaining to your daughter that this office belongs to Ms. Grant, not to Beacon Transport Solutions. Edmund's eyes narrowed. Belongs to her? What are you talking about? I reached into my folder and pulled out the lease agreement. 4 years ago, when the company moved to this building, you offered senior staff a leasing stipend to choose our own workspaces. I chose this office and signed the lease through my personal LLC. I handed him the document. He scanned it quickly, his expression darkening with each line he read. This can't be right. I assure you it is, Theodore said. The lease is valid and current. Ms. Grant has every right to this space. Edmund's face went through several shades of red. I could practically see him calculating the implications, realizing that he'd spent days bullying an employee over property that wasn't his to give away. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. That stipend program was meant to give senior employees autonomy, I finished quietly. And I exercised that autonomy by choosing this office. Melody looked between her father and me, panic creeping into her voice. But Dad, you promised. Not now, Melody, he snapped. The security guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Within an hour of the confrontation in my office, I received an email from HR requesting a private meeting at 3 o'clock. I wasn't surprised. When you embarrass the CEO in front of building management and security, there are consequences. I arrived at the HR office exactly on time. Vanessa Chin, the HR director, sat behind her desk with a carefully neutral expression. Edmund was also there, sitting in the corner like a storm cloud. Olivia, Vanessa began, we need to discuss some recent inappropriate behavior. I sat down and crossed my arms. Wine or Melody's? Vanessa's expression didn't change, but I saw her eye twitch slightly. We've received reports that you've been creating a hostile work environment. Reports from whom? I asked calmly. That's confidential, Edmund cut in. I nodded slowly. I see. So I'm being accused of something, but I'm not allowed to know who's accusing me or see the specific complaints. Vanessa shifted in her seat. The complaints suggest you've been resistant to reasonable requests and have created tension with other employees. Other employees, I repeated. You mean Melody? The CEO's daughter who tried to force me out of an office I legally lease. The situation is more nuanced than. I placed my phone on the table between us. Good thing I have evidence then. Both Vanessa and Edmund sat up straighter. Evidence? Vanessa asked carefully. I pulled up the recording app. Yesterday, when Melody entered my office uninvited while I was on a client call, I started recording. Would you like to hear the part where she kicked my chair? The room went completely silent. Edmund's face turned an interesting shade of purple. You recorded my daughter without her consent? Wisconsin is a one-party consent state, I replied calmly. I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of, especially in my own leased property. Vanessa held up a hand before Edmund could explode. Let's everyone take a breath and approach this professionally. But Edmund wasn't finished. You're creating a hostile environment. You're refusing to cooperate with company leadership. I could fire you for this. I'd been expecting that card to be played eventually. From my folder, I pulled out several printed documents and slid them across the table. These are my performance metrics for the past 6 years. Client retention rate of 98%. Revenue growth of 40% in my accounts. Peer reviews averaging 4.8 out of 5. But I understood why it stuck. Sometimes a cautionary tale needs a name people will remember. On my first day officially working as director, I walked into my office. The same office I'd fought to keep, the one with the Lake Michigan view, and set down my coffee. I opened the blinds, letting morning sunlight stream across my desk. The view was beautiful. But what mattered more was what it represented. Some people inherit power. They're born into it, handed a title and a corner office without ever having to prove themselves. Others earn it. Through late nights and early mornings. Through solving problems nobody else wants to touch. Through standing up when it would be easier to back down. And then there are people like Melody. People who confuse inheritance with worth, who think a famous last name is the same as actual competence. Those people usually learn a hard lesson eventually. I heard through the grapevine that Melody tried to spin her departure as pursuing entrepreneurship. She started some kind of lifestyle brand on social media, posting photos of her morning routine and giving advice about work-life balance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Edmund stayed on the board but rarely came to the office. When he did, we exchanged polite nods and nothing more. The relationship was professional and distant, which suited both of us fine. Patricia Blackwell proved to be an excellent CEO. Within 6 months, she'd restructured 3 departments, launched 2 new product lines, and increased company morale by simply treating people with respect and competence. My team thrived. We brought in our biggest client yet, a national shipping company that had been considering our main competitor. The negotiation took weeks, but we landed the contract. On the day we signed, I stood in my office looking out at the lake and thought about everything that had led to this moment. A spoiled CEO's daughter had tried to take what I'd earned, assuming I'd simply roll over and let it happen. Instead, she'd lost everything. Not because I destroyed her, but because she destroyed herself. Because she'd never learned the difference between being given something and earning it. I learned something too, though. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to be moved.